Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Baruchim Habayim, B'Shem Hashem, to the young Israel of Kivarin Hills for a very, very, very special Chazaq event with the world-renowned lecturer and author Rabbi Yissocher Frand. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Such an inspiring evening. We look forward, Rabbi Frand. Thank you very much for coming all the way from Baltimore. It means a lot to us. Before we begin tonight's important event, we'd like to first and foremost think of for everyone for coming. The truth is we did not have a sponsor for tonight's event. We had a small admission fee, so in essence every single one of you are sponsors. So Yishkoach everyone for sponsoring tonight's event. We really appreciate it. Regarding upcoming Chazaq events and programs, Baruch Hashem, we have many great shiurim coming up throughout the community. As usual, we welcome everyone to please come, spread the word to others, spread the wealth, let everyone know about the great inspiration that is happening in our community. Just one announcement of upcoming Chazaq events. That will be a save the date and don't miss out, April 3rd for the 4th annual Big Chazaq event. The annual Big Chazaq event, Baruch Hashem, has been a very big success. We had last year in Queens College with over 2,000 people in attendance. We are working on the same venue in Hashem this year. Previous speakers included Rabbi Pesach Kron, Rabbi Zechariah Warsi, and Charlie Harari, and the music last year was by Rabbi Frand. The lineup will be changed up a little bit this year. You'll be notified. You'll see the save the date flyers throughout the community. You'll get the emails, etc. Whoever is interested in sponsoring and being a partner of that event, that has so much chizuk, so much inspiration, so much unity, achdus. It's just simply unbelievable the amount of feedback that we get from these events. Please do come see us and let us know. We'll be more than happy to make that happen. Tonight, as was mentioned, we're at the Younger Yisroel Hills. We have the honor of having Rabbi Yissocher Frand, the rabbi of the shul, be here with us. And we're going to ask Rabbi Yissocher to please come and give us some opening remarks to the very psicha, please. Rabbi Yissocher, please.
Thank you, Yaniv. A couple of years ago, we had the zchus of having Rabbi Frand speak in our shul for some other cause. And I had a friend of mine, Rabbi Nate Siegel, some of you may know him or of him. He's in Staten Island, Tarmasara. So Rabbi Siegel said, he calls me up, he says, what is the matter with you? You introduce Rabbi Frand by saying, Yissocher who? And it turns out what happened was, in my introductory remarks then, I made note of the fact that when I was first heard of Rabbi Yissocher Frand, I was in the OU, I'm going back 20 some odd years ago, probably more. And we had a major event in the Homoac, a weekend event in the Homoac, and my secretary in the OU then, Aviva, she says, I heard this magnificent speaker, you must get him to speak for the OU. His name is Rabbi Yissocher Frand. And I said, Yissocher who? And so then of course I think the world got to know Rabbi Yissocher Frand. So in my introductory remarks, I said, well, I got to know Yissocher who. And I think that's all they used for my introductory remarks to introduce Rabbi Frand, was it started off with Yissocher who, the rest was all cut off. And but I think over this time, we've all got to know very, very well. It's probably Yoel Schoenfeld who, and but Rabbi Yissocher Frand, wherever you travel in the globe, everybody knows exactly who he is and has heard of him. I was just telling Rabbi Frand, we had a long day. It was a mixture of simchas, not simchas, bikur cholam, muncie, all over the map today, but I told them I made sure to land here at 8 o'clock because he is one of the few people that's kedai to drop everything that you're doing, if you can, and just come to hear what Rabbi Frand has to say. So I say kol hakavod to Chazaq for with the always having something stimulating, outstanding, incredible is really the word for these young people behind this movement of Chazaq, that they're able to put this together. Rabbi Frand is on a very tight schedule, so I'm not going to take more of his time, and it's just our supposed to be able to host him, and I thank Yaniv and Chazaq for making all of this possible.
Thank you once again to Rabbi Schoenfeld, the Young Israel, for opening its doors as usual. I do want to mention two other cards. Tov, thank yous. Number one is to the local newspaper, the Queen Jewish Link, for helping publicize tonight's event and being always there for us and getting the word out. Chazaq Baruch to them. They deserve a round of applause, please. Thank you. And of course, we want to thank the Chazaq staff, the young men and women like Rabbi Shonfeld mentioned, that are behind the scenes and always there for us. We have quite a few of our office staff here. Joyce, we have Rachel, we have Yafa, we have Tzipi upstairs, we have Izzy, we have Hanana. So Chazaq Baruch Yishkayach for all your help. You guys are really the ones that make Chazaq what it is. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it's a big honor, tzchus, merit for us to have and host Rabbi Yissocher Frand over here in our community. He really needs no introduction, like Rabbi Shonfeld said. Everyone knows Baruch Hashem, his work, whether it's speeches or CDs or articles or books. We've definitely been inspired. So without further ado, let's give a nice loud round of applause to Rabbi Yissocher Frand, please. On behalf of the Rav, like Rabbi Shonfeld said, the Rav will have to run out right after the shiur to catch a train. So please do keep that in mind. And we will have Meir Baravit right after the lecture as well.
Bershus the Morda Asra, Rabbi Shonfeld. I may add my good friend Rabbi Shonfeld, Rabbi Scholfeld, who I've known now for many, many years. I suggest that you now send your introduction to Rabbi Nate Siegel and show him that you have, in fact, done me very, very great justice in for your elaborate introduction. Paisim Ichveidu Achsanya. And the Achsanya for tonight, as you all know, is the organization Chazaq. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Chazaq, but Chazaq does the type of work that almost could be called a meis mitzvah. A meis mitzvah is the type of mitzvah that very few people try to engage themselves in. But they are not deterred by that. And they deal literally with thousands of kids who, after they're in public school, they come to different programs that they have in the afternoon, different programs that they have in the evening. These are the type of kids that sort of fall by the wayside, and no one is there to take care of them. But that's what Chazaq does, what it has done, and what it continues to do. Chazaq does not need children to teach, but what it does need, it needs money. And therefore, whenever you have an opportunity to support this organization and the work that they do, it's really it's a tremendous mitzvah, because by virtue of the fact that there are not that many people that are engaged in dealing and teaching Torah to public school children and public school teenagers especially. So techazakna yedechem, you the organizers of Chazaq. I want to give my personal thanks to Mr. Rav Yaniv Meirov for arranging this and taking care of this and making sure that I am taken care of. I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Goldsmith for picking me up, and more importantly for taking me back to the train, which is at 10:05, and I do not feel like wandering the streets of Manhattan like a homeless person this evening. So therefore, I really want to thank them in advance for getting me out of here. I apologize for this hitting and running, but such is the life of people who live out of town, so they say. For the last 3 years, I've had the privilege of acting as a scholar in residence of tours of Jewish Europe for the past 3 years. In our first trip, we visited Italy, on the Jewish sites there in Italy. 2 years ago, we went to Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary. And last year, we were in Germany, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, and Holland. Over these 3 years, we have literally traveled the 2,000 years of Jewish history. And starting there in Italy and continuing all the way up to Hungary, these trips, we literally covered 2,000 years of history. In Italy, We visited, like all tourists do, we visited the famous Roman Colosseum. But what most tourists don't know, certainly not the non-Jews, is that we built that Colosseum. We Jews built that Colosseum. After Titus destroyed the Beis HaMikdash in the year 70 of the Common Era, so he took 95,000 slaves from Eretz Yisroel to Rome, and they built that Colosseum. It was built by Jewish slaves. And from there, from the Colosseum, we went to the famous Arch of Titus, the Arch of Titus. It's a picture that I've seen, I'm sure many of you have seen. It's the picture of an arch that Titus's brother built for him upon his triumphant return from Israel to Rome, from within Palestine to Rome. And there is a mural in that arch, etched in that arch, famous picture of Jewish captives carrying the menorah on their backs with the inscription that runs underneath the picture of Judah Kapta, which means Judea Kapta, the land of Judea, has been conquered. And standing there under that arch, I relate the famous story of the Panovich Rav Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, the story that many of you may have heard. The Panovich Rav, besides being a Goyin Olam and a great Rosh Yeshiva and a great builder of Torah, he was also a prolific fundraiser, and he traveled entirely over the entire world, from South Africa to South America, and one of his trips fundraising took him to Rome to raise money for the Panovich Yeshiva there in Rome. The Panovich Rav got to Rome that night. It was a rainy night, and he called up a former student of his, a Dr. Rothschild, who was a doctor practicing medicine in Rome. And he gets to Rome and he calls Dr. Rothschild late at night and he says, "Take me to the Arch of Titus, the Arch of Titus." And Dr. Rothschild said to his Rebbe, the Panovich Rav, "Can't this wait until tomorrow morning? Do we have to go in the dark of night when it's raining?" He says, "Yes, yes, we have to go right now." And they took a taxi and they went to the Arch of Titus, and the Panovich Rav stood there under the Arch of Titus, and he said the famous words, "Titus, mir zenen da, avu bisdu," which means, "Titus, we are here. Where are you?" The Panovich Rav lost his entire family, most of his family, his wife and children, during the Holocaust. He came to Eretz Yisroel a broken man, without a family, without a wife, without children. He went ahead and not only did he rebuild his life, but he rebuilt the yeshiva of Panovich, which existed in Lithuania. If there was ever a statement that was infused, with the one hand with pathos and tragedy, but yet suffused with incredible hope and strength and gvur, it's that. Titus, mir zenen da. Titus, we the Jewish people, we're still here. Avu bisdu. Where are you? The mighty Emperor Titus and the mighty Roman Empire. Where are you? Today the Roman Colosseum is ruins. And you, the great Titus, are not to be heard from. I even had non-Jews standing there listening to that speech. Titus, we're here. Where are you? That event, that Arch of Titus goes back to 2,000 years. By Shemi, destruction of the Second Temple. Fast forward, this year we visited Germany, and the famous cities that are known in Jewish history, them from the Kiddush that we say on Tisha B'Av. The cities of spires, worms, and mines, or they're known by their Hebrew names: Shapira, Vermaiza, and Magenza. That city, Magenza, Mainz, was the home of the yeshiva of Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGoyla. Rabbi Gershom had a yeshiva, which in his day was the yeshiva to come to, circa 900, 950. Rashi, the famous Rashi, the great Rashi, Rabban Shal Yisroel, the master teacher of all of Klal Yisrael. Rashi, without whom we cannot learn a pasuk in Chumash, and we can't learn a daf of Gemara. Rashi came to those cities the yeshiva had already moved, to Vermais and Lady Shapira, and he learned in those cities. And we went to that shul that was Rashi's shul, subsequently destroyed in World War II, but rebuilt, and we never bought a bottle of Rashi wine. That picture of that bottle of wine, that is in fact Rashi's shul. Rashi learned the Rashi davened. Those cities, Shapira, Vermais, and Magenza, Spires, words, and minds. They were the first to bear the brunt of the Crusades. When in the year 1096, Pope Urban II declared the first crusade, and to go to Jerusalem and to rescue Jerusalem from the hands of the infidels, the Muslims. So they came up with a great idea. What do we have to go ahead and wait till we get to Israel, to Palestine, to attack the infidels? What about the infidels right here in our cities in Germany? And they went and they took out their wrath on these cities of Shapira, Vermais, and Magen. And Jews were given a painful choice that they've been given, unfortunately, so many times over Jewish history. And that is either convert to Christianity or die. And as much as we like to think the Jews passed that test and died al Kiddush Hashem, but there were many Jews that didn't. And they succumbed. And they converted to Christianity, at least outwardly. By this time, Rashi was back in France, but his connection to these cities in Germany was still very much alive. And Rashi was given the task. We know Rashi to be the great Pashtan, the great Mefarish of Chumash, and the great Mefarish of the Gemara of the Talmud, but Rashi was also a Paisek. He also wrote Shuvas. And these cities asked him such very, very painful shilas. Like, what is the halach of a person that shmadzach, that had converted to Christianity, but now he's coming back? Can we drink his wine? Does he have a halach of a goy, of a non-Jew, that you can't drink from his wine? And even if they did tshuva, waiting period, to see whether their return is in fact sincere. So Rashi had to ask the shaila, what's the status of such Jews? And Rashi writes, the Rashi decided Rashi, they won't see that often, the compassionate, the empathetic Rashi, who writes that he says, Chalila liprish miyenim ulevaisham. Heaven forfend to forbid their wine. Ki loimalam libam la nachzich lain la'avodah zara. They had no intention of really idol worship. And masha asu misham avkas cherev umi alu lefresh. They only did it under duress, but as soon as the duress was removed, they came back to Judas, and sincerely so. Rashi was asked to shaila, if such a Jew who's a kohen, converted to Christianity, and now he's choser b'tshuva, he's coming back in tshuva, can he duchen in a shul? How would you pass in that shaila? A person that last week or last month or last year was wearing a cross around his neck, now he wants to duchen in shul. Rashi writes, Rashi, koser leduchen. You can go ahead, you can accept this tshuva, and he can duchen. And you have to realize that this was not a popular stance. How would you like it if you were Omed ben Nisayan, and you suffered, and you were tortured, but you were strong enough, and somebody else gave in, he wasn't strong enough, and now he comes back and he wants Mafter Yaina. He should get Mafter Yaina? But Rashi says, yes, he should. And Rashi writes over there, and he says, very interesting insight into Rashi. V'gam yom havinoisi b'divrei Talmud libi noite achar amatirim. Rashi writes that my approach is to be lenient. That's what Rashi says. I want to be mekel. Now go forward another couple hundred years. And we were in Italy. And when we were in Italy, we visited cities that were once teeming with Jews. You know, most people don't associate Italy as being a center for Judaism. But something happened in 1492. The Spanish Inquisition. And many Jews again were given the choice, convert to Christianity or leave, and leave with all your possessions. And thousands of Jews did leave. And where did they go to? They went to Italy. And Italy became a center of Judaism, a center of Jewish printing. The first Shas, first Talmud Bavli was printed in Italy. The first Mikros Gedolos was printed in Italy. We went to those cities of Venice and Padua. We saw how Jews lived. 4,000 Jews had to live in a Jewish ghetto that encompassed 7,000 acres. You know what that is? The equivalent of 5 football fields. Imagine being fetched and surrounded and children, families and children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, all in the Jewish ghetto. And all they had to do to leave that ghetto was to convert. You go to these cities and you see what Jews went through and how they were meiser nefesh for their Yiddishkeit, and how Jews in Italy did not eat chametz an entire year, so that because they said that their stomach could not take the chametz, so that on Pesach they could eat matzah. Can you imagine not eating a piece of cake or pasta or bread for an entire year, so that you'll be able to eat matzah on Pesach? You can't leave these cities without feeling the great Mesiras Nefesh. 2 years ago, we were in Slovakia, in the city of Pressburg, that's today known as Bratislava. We visited the kever of the Chassam Sofer. And what Chassam Sofer did for Yiddishkeit. You have to realize we're here today to a large extent because of the Chassam Sofer. Because the Chassam Sofer was the first one to do battle against the Reform. In 1815, there was the first Reform synagogue. And someone had to draw the line and fight the battle. The Chassam Sofer did that in Hungary. And it was a battle. And they were just waiting for the Chassam Sofer to die. Chassam Sofer married a woman with whom he had no children. And she died before he did. Chassam Sofer, when he was 50 years old, married a woman who was 25. But the Reform were just waiting for the Chassam Sofer to die. He has no children, and then it will be able to take over. But little did he know that the Chassam Sofer then went on to father 10 children, who continued in his tradition. Hungarian Jewry did not succumb to a large extent to the Reform movement because of the Chassam Sofer. When we went to that kever that was recently rebuilt, and daven in his kever, and the women certainly shed tears, but even the men shed tears at the kever of the Chassam Sofer. And last year we went to Germany. We stood at the kever of Rabbi Shamshon Foil Hirsch and what the Chassam Sofer did to save Hungarian Jewry. Rabbi Shamshon Foil Hirsch did to save Germany. Before the Rabbi Shamshon Foil Hirsch was successful in his battle against the Reform, there were cities in Germany that you couldn't get a mikveh, that there was no kosher meat, that entire classes of boys didn't put on tefillin. Some Sefer went, the Shashal for Hirsch saved German Jewry. Last year, we were in Hungary. Our trip ended in Budapest, which, by the way, is a beautiful city. And we stood there at what's called the Shoe Memorial. The Shoe Memorial is a site that about 10 years ago, a non-Jewish man made sculptures of shoes on the banks of the Danube River. Why shoes? Because in 1944, when Adolf Hitler, Yamach Shemai V'Zichrei, broke his peace treaty with Hungary and invaded Hungary to deport the Jews, there was a fascist group that now they saw it was a field day against the Jews. And they would line up Jews on the banks of the Danube River, and they would have them take off their shoes. And then they would mow them down with machine guns. That the famous blue Danube turned red. Now they told them to take off their shoes because shoes were valuable in those days. But I pointed out to our group that there's a significance perhaps in the fact that they weren't wearing shoes. Because every one of those Jews that were killed because they're Jews were Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. And they have halacha of a Kodesh. The Rambam says in Ilchas Yisaydi HaTorah that any Jew that dies only because he's a Jew is a Kodesh. He's a holy person. Which made that spot there on the banks of the Danube, it made it into a holy place. And ironically, when you are in a holy place, we know what the Torah says you must do. Take off your shoes, because you're standing on hallowed ground. Now, I did not tell the people in our group, take off your shoes. But I did tell them the following. The Torah makes a big deal of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu went to check out the burning bush. The famous burning bush. Vayar Hashem kisor lirais. The Rebbeinu Shalom saw that Moshe Rabbeinu went and checked it out. The bush is burning, but it's not being consumed. Let me ask you a question. If you saw a bush that was burning and it wasn't being consumed, wouldn't you check it out? So the Torah makes a big deal. Vayar Hashem kisar lirois. He saw that Moshe Rabbeinu checked it out. Every person would check it out. So what's the godless? What's the great thing that the Torah has to record? Vayar Hashem kisar lirois. So the Siforno on the spot explains this. Vayar Hashem kisar lirois, says the Siforno, his boinein bedavar. Of course it was miraculous, and anyone would have checked it out. But Moshe Rabbeinu said to himself, what's the message? His boinein bedavar, to think, what is God telling me? And what God was telling him is a profound and a prophetic message. And that is, Hasneh einenu ukol. That Klal Yisroel will be burned and tortured and have every inhumane thing that one can think of. V'hasneh einenu ukol. But Klal Yisroel will still be around. And I told the people in our group that several months before we were there, there was a ceremony at this same shoe memorial, because it marked the 70th anniversary of when Hungarian Jews were being deported to Auschwitz. And the Kalever Rebbe, Reb Menachem Mendel Taub, who was a Holocaust survivor, who lived in Hungary, and who was deported, and who survived the concentration camps. The Kalever Rebbe came back to that very spot. And there on that spot, he sang a Hungarian niggin. Not a Jewish niggin, but a niggin that if you are from Hungarian descent, this is probably familiar with you. The name of the niggin is Sola Kokoshmar. But what was so moving was the old Kalever Rebbe was standing there with little Hungarian cheder boys, 8, 10 years old, who learned Torah in Budapest. And there in their sweet, high-pitched voices, they sang along with the Kalever Rebbe, this old Hungarian niggin that has become a Kalever niggin. And to see the juxtaposition of the old Kalever Rebbe, who was deported to Auschwitz, and the young Hungarian Kinderlach learning Torah and singing Sola Kokoshmar, one had to come to the inescapable conclusion that the tree will never be consumed. Kol Yisrael will always be around. That was my message there on the banks of the Danube. And if you follow politics, this is really not germane to the speech, but let me add to you an anecdote. There was a fellow there who was kneeling down, who was taking pictures of the shoe memorial. This guy, you could tell from a mile away, was not Jewish. He was about 6'5", broad-shouldered, maybe weighed 250 pounds. Good-looking guy with his wife. And the chevra there, the group, starting schmoozing with this guy. Who is this fellow? His name is Mark Meadows. Does that ring a bell to any of you? Mark Meadows is the congressman from the 11th District of North Carolina. For those of you who really follow politics, he's the guy that set the motion in motion that they should get rid of John Boehner. But he stood there with his wife for my drasha about Hasnei Nenu Kol. And he and his wife were mamish in tears. Hasnei Nenu Kol. To hear about the Jewish people and how eternal the Jewish people are. So there you have it. 2,000 years of Jewish history. Going back to the Colosseum in Rome in the year 70 of the Common Era, all the way up to 1944, when Hungarian Jews were deported, and 2015 at that memorial. 2,000 years. You look back at those 2,000 years and say, what has happened in those 2,000 years? You think of the great scholarship, the Limud HaTorah, that has transpired in those years. The Torah that has been learned. The time of the Gaonim and the Rishonim and Rashi and the Balei Tosfos and the Rambam. All the way up to the Achronim. You go into the shuls of Europe, that the walls are saturated with tears. The Makam Tefillah, the davening that happened there. Beautiful shuls. There's a shul in Florence that I went into that I must say is the most beautiful shul I've ever seen in my life. It's so beautiful that the Nazis Yamach Shemam, didn't want to destroy that shul. It's so beautiful. You go back and you go to the kever, the Maharil, and if you're familiar with halacha, you know that the Maharil is the source of so much of Ashkenazic Jewry, the minhagim. The Ramah brings all the time, Maharil, Maharil, Maharil. I stood at his kever and I daven. Torah, tefillah, minig. It's all there. But there's also one other dominant theme. And that's suffering. Terrible, terrible suffering. How the Jews have suffered for all those years. Which leads to the question of how do we deal with that? How do we understand such suffering? All the pogroms and the inquisitions, and the forced conversions, and the pogroms, and the Tach B'Tat 1648, 1649, and the Holocaust. How do we put that in perspective? How do we deal with that? So I want to share with you the following thought. Yaakov Avinu in Parshas Vayigash is about to go down to Mitzrayim, to Egypt. And the pasuk says, "Vayemer Anochi Hakel Elokei Avicha." I'm the God of your father. Al tira merda Mitzrayim. Don't be afraid to go down to Egypt. Ki l'goy gadol asimcha sham. I'll make you into a great and mighty nation. Anochi ereid imcha Mitzrayim. The Rebbeinu Shalom says to Yaakov, I'm going to go down with you. V'anochi elocha gam aloi v'yosef yashis yadai aleinecha. And your son Yosef will close your eyes when you die. Yaakov Avinu is about to go down to Mitzrayim, and he's afraid. Al tira, don't be afraid. You know why Yaakov Avinu is afraid? He's not only afraid of going down to Egypt, but Yaakov in Ruach HaKodesh, with a form of prophecy, sees what we just witnessed. He sees not just the Golus of Mitzrayim, the Egyptian exile, but he sees it all. He sees the Babylonian exile, and he sees the Persians, and he sees the Greeks, and he sees the Romans, and he sees Churban Habayis, and he sees those 2,000 years of Jewish history, which I just recounted, and he's just so afraid. Was wird sein, was geht sein mit meinen Kindern, mein Eneklach? What's going to be with my children and my grandchildren? Yaakov Avinu is afraid. How are they going to survive? This is what Yaakov Avinu is afraid of. And to this, the Rebbeinu Shalom says, Al tira, don't be afraid. Why not? Says the Zohar HaKadosh, the famous Zohar, the holy Zohar, the source of Kabbalah. The Zohar adds 3 cryptic words on that pasuk, Al tira merda Mitzrayim. Says the Zohar, Da Roza de Kriyashma. This is the secret of Kriyashma. This is what Rebbeinu Shalom tells Yaakov Avinu. Don't be afraid. Da Roza de Kriyashma. Because this is the secret of what's embedded in Kriyashma. What does that Zohar mean? That cryptic Zohar. To understand that Zohar, you have to understand the Gemara in Masechta Pesachim. The Gemara says in Masechta Pesachim, "V'haya Hashem l'melech al kol haaretz, b'yom hahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmei echad." On that day, the name of Hashem will be echad u'shmei echad, and His name will be echad. Ask the Gemara in Masechta Pesachim, Otu ha'idna lav echad hu? In that day in the future, that's when the name of God will be one, and not today? Today, God is not one. We said this morning, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What do you mean in that day His name will be one? Says the Gemara, Amar Acha Bar Chanina L'Olam Hazeh Olam Haba. This world is not like the world to come. Ha'olam Hazeh, in this world, Ha'basuras Tayvei Seimer Baruch Hatav HaMeitiv. When something good happens in this world, you make a bracha. Hatav HaMeitiv. The one who's good and does good to others. You have a baby boy, you make Hatav HaMeitiv. You buy a car, you can drive others, you make Hatav HaMeitiv. That's in this world. Good news, Hatav HaMeitiv. Al-Bsuris Roy. But to hear bad news, the news of a death of someone, a loved one, Amir Baruch Dayin Ha'emes. You say on bad news, Baruch Dayin Ha'emes. La'olam haba, in the world to come, Kulay Hatav HaMeitiv. It'll all be good. It'll all be good. How can bad be good? How can you make Hatav HaMeitiv on something bad, on something tragic, on death, on tragedy? The pshat in this Gemara is, in this world, we have a very, very limited perspective. We don't know the past. We certainly don't know the future. When something happens that's tragic, death, illness, other tsaras, it's bad. It's tragic. There's only one reaction to that. Baruch Dayin Ha'emes. But in Olam Haba, we're going to look back. We're going to look back at our lives. We're going to look back at 2,000 years of history. And we're going to see, at least retroactively, that God had a master plan. And every one of those things that appeared tragic and terrible and horrible, there was a rhyme and a reason for it. And in Olam Haba, we'll look back at everything and say, you know what? Hatav HaMeitiv. It really was good. It's very difficult for us to comprehend that, because we don't see the whole picture. But in Olam Haba, when we will see the entire scope of history, the scope of each and every one of our lives and the lives of all of Klal Yisrael and the history of Klal Yisrael, somehow it's going to make eminent sense. We'll be able to say Hatav HaMeitiv. This thought is really a Chasam Sofer. The Chasam Sofer says the same thing. In the Pasuk, when Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Ribbon Shalom Parshas Kisisa, he asked the question of questions, why do the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper? The Ribbon Shalom answers Moshe Rabbeinu, and he says to him, stand in the cleft of the rock, Vasiresias Kapi, and I'll remove Kapi, Varisas Achayroi, and you'll see me from the back. Fonai lo yiro. The pasuk does not mean that God says you'll be able to see me from the back, but not the front. What the pasuk is saying, Varisas Achayrai, when it's done, you'll understand Tzaddik V'Ralai. Ufonai lo yeru, up front, no man will be able to understand that. If there's one story in all of Tanakh that encapsulates this message, it's the story of Yosef and his brothers. Here, Yosef is the most beloved son of Yaakov Avinu. He loses him. He thinks he's dead for 20 plus years. Yaakov Avinu, the tzaddik, Yosef the tzaddik, killed by wild animals? Is there no justice in this world? How does that happen? How does such a terrible tragedy happen? Well, we know the answer to that story. Because God had this grand plan that the Jews had to go down to Egypt. And he knew that there was going to be a famine, and someone had to go ahead and sustain not only Yaakov's family, but the entire planet. So God takes Yosef, he places him in Egypt. He goes through trials and tribulations. He winds up in the dungeon. And then he winds up standing in front of Paro, and he feeds the world and he feeds his family. And Yaakov finally comes down to Mitzrayim, and he finally realizes, now I chap. Now I understand. It wasn't bad. It was good. And that's what Ribbon Shalom means when he says, V'Yosef Yoshis Yodai Aleinecha. Yosef will cover your eyes. And this is what the Zohar means. Da Roza de Kriya Shema. This is the secret of Kriya Shema. Because in Kriya Shema, if you pay attention to the words, Shema Yisroel, Hashem, the word Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that connotes rachamim and mercy and compassion. Hashem Elokeinu. Elokeinu is the name of Hashem that connotes strict justice, midas hadin. How could it be? Hashem Elokeinu? Which is it? Is it midas harachamim? Or is it midas hadin? Hashem, Elokeinu. It's a contradiction. Compassion versus justice. Now Hashem Echad. It's the same God. It's one and the same God. Because even when he metes out that strict justice, it's with compassion. And in this world, it's sometimes very difficult to recognize that. This is perhaps what the Gemara means in Masechta Brachos. Have you ever wondered about this? Gemara says in Brachos, Taner Abanan, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad Zu Kriya Shema Shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the editor of the Mishnah, his Kriya Shema was just that one pasuk, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Says the Gemara, listen to a Gemara. Amalei Rabbi Chia Leichazina Le'Rebbe the Mekabel Alei Al Machus Shamayim. You know what? Rebbe's in the yeshiva. He's teaching Torah. He's saying shiur. I never see him laying in Kriya Shema. When is he laying Kriya Shema? Says the Gemara Amalei Bapachsi B'Shah Shemavir Yodai Al Ponav Mekabel Olav Al Machus Shamayim. You know when Rebbe lays Kriya Shema? When he covers his eyes. We don't see it, we don't hear it. But when he covers his eyes, he says, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You know how we cover our eyes? It's a midig b'chol tfutzas Yisrael. Sfardi, Ashkenazi, Litva, Chosid, Yeke, non-Yeke. Everybody covers their eyes. Why? Because Shema Yisrael, Hashem, that midas harachamim, that midah of compassion, Elokeinu, the midah, the characteristic of din, of justice, Hashem Echad. I can't perceive that. I can't understand that. I don't see it. But I close my eyes and I believe it. Even though I can't see it. And that's why we cover our eyes. And that's the Yosef Yoshiv Yodai Aleinecha. Yosef who knows this so well, all too well. about the midas hadin and the midas hachesed and the midas hadin and the midas harachamim, and that you cannot know the whole story until it's all over. He's the one that will cover your eyes. Yosef Yoshis Yodai Alei Necha. You know, every once in a while, we see examples of this. We see things that happen that, so there's just no way in the world that this is good. This is inexplicable. I want to give you two examples, two stories. One of them I heard from someone who heard it from someone else who was involved, so it's secondhand. The other one I heard from the person himself, firsthand. There was a couple in Lakewood, New Jersey, who their child ran out into the street, was hit by a car, was killed. Rahmanul Islam. You can imagine what that Shiva house looked like. One day during Shiva, another couple comes in. So we have to tell you a story. This is a couple that were involved in Kir V'chaikim. They went out to a city, a little town, that had no mikveh, had a handful of Jews, but no mikveh. And this couple decided that they're going to build a mikveh. They're going to get together the money. They're going to build a mikveh. They scraped, and they begged, and they pleaded. And some nights they would have cereal because to save money, so they could get together the money. And they were successful, and they built a mikveh. And they maintained the mikveh. And one night they went in there to make sure everything is clean and to maintain the mikveh, and they took with them their little toddler. This is a true story. And they weren't paying attention. They noticed all of a sudden that the toddler was nowhere to be found. They started looking for him, and unfortunately he fell into the mikveh. And he drowned. Zu Torah v'zu schara. This is the reward for being Meiser Nefesh and giving everything to build a mikveh, and this is what happens to us? Our child dies in that mikveh? They were inconsolable. Until one night the father, again, this is a true story. One night the father has a dream. And his son comes to him in the dream. And he says to him that I am the neshama of a Jew that was killed during the Spanish Inquisition, who never had tahara. And Ribono Shel Olam wanted that my tahara should be performed in a mikveh that is built al taras hakadosh, the most pure mikveh in the world. And it took 500 years for that mikveh to be built. But that's why that child fell into that mikveh. And that's what the couple, the Kiev couple, told the couple from Lakewood. That you may not get dreams in the middle of the night like we did. But that's just an example. We don't know the whole story. You know, there's a popular niggin. It's actually a beautiful niggin. The words are either words attributed to the Baal Shem Tov, or to Reb Nachman Reb Breslov. Have you ever heard of Niggin? You know what I mean when I say beautiful Niggin. The words of the Niggin are, Afilu b'hastara, shebesoicha hastara. Even in the cloud, in the hidden cloud, which is hidden among the clouds, bevadai gam nimsa Hashem Yisbarach. We can't see it, and he's hidden, not just hidden, but a secret in an enigma. Afilu b'hastara. Star means hidden. Shebesoicha hastara. Bevadai nimsa sham Hashem Yisbarach. The song goes, the Eberster sagt sein Kinderlach. God tells his little children, V'anoichi haster aster fonai bayem ahu. There will be days that I will hide from you. Gamayachere hadvarim hakoshim ha'oimed oimdim alecha. But in spite of the fact that the terrible tzoros that will befall you, Anoichi oimed, I'm there. Afilu b'hastara, shebesei hastara, b'vadei gam nimsa Hashem Yisbarach. In the most hidden and inexplicable things, God is still there. And here's the final story. There's a Yid in Eretz Yisroel, a man who gives shiurim. His name is Rav Menashe Reisman. Sometimes this last summer, the community of Antwerp, Belgium, called him and asked him if he could come to Antwerp during Elul and to give a shmooze before the Yomim Neiroim. And he told them he doesn't really like to travel. He's busy giving shiurim in Eretz Yisrael, shmooze in Eretz Yisrael. They begged, they pleaded. He said, okay, I'll think about it. They called him back and they said, listen, I'm not going to come during Elul, but I'll come to you on Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan. Come to you in the beginning of October. Fine. Came to them on the beginning of October. It was a Tuesday. Rosh Chodesh Mar Cheshvan. This man, Rav Menashe Reisman, gives a shiur on Tuesdays in Eretz Yisrael, across from the Belzer complex in Yerushalayim. There are about 200 people to come to that shiur once a week, between 9 and 10 a.m. On that Tuesday that he's supposed to give the shiur in Eretz Yisrael, he's in Antwerp. He asked the Rav, should I get a substitute so the people don't miss out? He says, no, don't get a substitute. One day, it's all right, don't worry, let's go to Belgium, give the shiur. On the Sunday before that Tuesday, there was a Bezek car that was parked in front of that shul, across from that shul, in front of a bus stop. On the Monday before that Tuesday, that same Bezek car was parked across the street from the shul, waiting to see what's going to happen. On that Tuesday, that faithful Tuesday, when that fellow in the Bezek car was standing there at 10 o'clock in the morning, waiting for all of those Jews to come out of that shul like they do at 10, 10:05, 10:10. But there were no Jews. Where are they? This Arab runs into the Beis Medrash of Rav Reisman. Where is everybody? The security cameras pick it up. They see this guy all distraught, running back and forth. He gets into his car, and he drives to Geula, and he rams his car into a bus stop that there are two Yidden sitting in that bus stop. Maybe you saw the picture. And he gets out of his car and he takes a knife, he starts stabbing it into one of those people. You know what was supposed to happen? He was waiting for those 200 people to come out. He was waiting to ram his car not into 2 people, but into 200 people. For some inexplicable reason, to which Rabbi Reisman to this day says, I don't know why I decided to take that position and say that shiur in Antwerp, which I never do. But now he knows why. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to stop the massacre of 200 Yidden. Now, is it a tragedy that those other Jews were hurt and maimed and killed, some of them? Yes, it's a tragedy. But it's less of a tragedy. This is an example. This gives us an insight of afilu b'hastorah, shebesoicho hastorah. In the darkest of the dark, in the cloudiest of the cloud, in the cloud within the cloud, and the hidden within the cloud within the hidden within the hidden. Gam acharei hadvarim hakoshim. Ani omeid, ani omeid. The Rebbeinu Shalom says, I'm still with you. Does life always turn out so pat that someone comes to someone in a dream and tells them why the tragedy happened? Do we always figure out why instead of 2 people killed, rather than 200 people killed, 2 people are killed? No. Life, unfortunately, is not that neat. But from these stories we can extrapolate to understand that Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem of mercy, Hashem of Elokeinu of din, Hashem Echad. And that we should, if we don't understand it, we should at least have faith that the Rebbeinu Shalom is there, is watching over us, and ultimately we will understand one day the Kol Ma'adav Rahman L'Tava of it, that it was all for the good. Good night.
Yissochar Rabbi Frand. Let's give Rabbi Frand another round of applause, please. Like mentioned earlier, Rabbi Frand is in a quick rush, so please do understand that he has to catch a train. At this time, we will have Ma'ariv Arabit for the men. Tonight we have a shiur in Shari